Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You're listening to the Johnny Gosch series. This is episode 10, America's Most Wanted. We will be discussing the supposedly disappeared episode. The episode that has been erased and scrubbed from the internet. Featuring Paul Bonacci. And the visit to this infamous Colorado house with a very shady basement with scribbled initials, not just JG, but others. And plenty more in typical Mindshock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront, unlike any other podcast out there. If you want to help keep up awareness in unsolved cases, missing persons cases, cold cases, wrongful convictions, and more, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. If you're not getting notifications, you can sign up on our Patreon. Even the free tier will have all the notifications for the latest live episodes and all episodes here on Mindshock. You could also check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. Or if you are with us here live in the live chat, I'll try to get to all of them. So welcome everyone tonight. And yeah, the big teaser, I do have clips from the episode. Now, nobody has provided the full episode, but I have clips from it, and I will play them. So we can see this ominous Colorado house, supposedly owned by an Air Force official, possibly with connections to the one and only Colonel Aquino of the Air Force, tied to Satanism and human trafficking. It's actually kind of shocking that in the post-Epstein era, there are still these gullible goof bootlicking coincidence theorists who hallucinate that government officials cannot be involved in trafficking of any kind. It's kind of weird. I mean, I guess they're just that mentally weak. They just can't. They don't have the mental capacity to comprehend that there are corrupt people in government positions, and they don't always act alone. I mean, I don't know what makes that shocking. In the so-called official Johnny Gosch subreddit, r/Johnny Gosch, there are even these clueless goofs hallucinating that there aren't that many missing children in the first place. So actually, let's start this off with some basic statistics for these goofy coincidence theorists. Now, maybe they're shills. Maybe they're paid to downplay government-backed human trafficking. I mean, man, a lot of goofs just don't know about, the issues with CPS. Those who died trying to expose government-run human trafficking and child exploitation. I mean, just the goofery across the board by these ignorant coincidence theorist goofs. I mean, it's just flat out disgusting how these scum deny victims. I mean, can you be more of a disgusting human being than a coincidence theorist denying the suffering of children? I mean, can you be more scum than that? I mean, I don't know. Clark Rice in the chat asks, Aquino went on to run the NSA. No, he's also head priest of the Temple of Set. He's been involved in a lot of high-ranking positions, yes. Also involved with MK Ultra brainwashing and psychological operations. His name is even on one of the main documents, one of the main public manuals since declassified. But I went over that in previous episodes. But welcome everybody here, South to West. Fire Pixie, Steffi Hugs, Amory Mass, Duckin Felonies, with all underscore. Is that 3 or 4 underscores? So yeah, but let's just start with this, some basic statistics for the coincidence theorist goofs. Just really basic stats, and then we'll get into the America's Most Wanted. I don't want to focus on Walsh here. I went over Adam Walsh and John Walsh in the Jeffrey Dahmer deep dives. If you haven't checked those out on Mindshock, check those out. I want to focus mostly on this Johnny Gosch episode and Bonacci and this house and just all of the footage that exists. So let me bring up the stats here. People are familiar with there's an 800,000 to 1 million missing children stat from the FBI. And supposedly a large portion of those are found later. But there's actually another stat from the Department of Justice, I believe. Just give me a second here. I'll bring that up. There's also a lot of coping goofs on this subreddit, Johnny Gosh. Let's look. Actually, and they never respond whenever people actually post receipts, which I of course always do. They usually either don't respond or they just go into these projection cope spirals of just these profane ramblings that have nothing to do with rebutting any actual argument. So let's go to here. I mean, you guys are not going to believe this. So there was actually a lawsuit here, Aquino versus Stone. Let me put the receipts on the screen here once again for all of the coincidence theorist bootleggers. I mean, can you imagine bootlicking for government? I mean, how can you take the position of those harming children? I mean, it's kind of crazy, just the level of scum out there and publicly posting on social media. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Like, why would anybody take a position against children? I mean, it's just so weird. I mean, it's almost like they're exposing themselves. I mean, are they involved in a lot of this kind of stuff? So they have to pretend it's not real? Or is it just mentally weak goofs coping because they don't want this to be true so badly, and they're just so mentally weak that they can't handle it? So let me just bring this on the screen, and then we'll get into the stats, and then we'll get into the America's Most Wanted episode. That's what we have on the agenda. And I'll try to get to everybody in the chat as well. So this is the Aquino versus Stone case. And I just want to go over a very interesting point in this document. And it's going to send the coincidence theorists into conniptions, because these goofs just can't handle facts or documentation of any kind, because they have to pretend and hallucinate that all of this is unsubstantiated. Alright, here we go. Just want to get all the pertinent stuff on the screen here. So this is kind of crazy because Aquino the corruption is laid out in this document blatantly. So, I mean, for anybody without a mental disability who at least is literate in English, I mean, this is all very, very clear. Just gonna highlight it in red here. All right. Alright, let's get this receipt on the screen. Okay. So, for those who don't know what this scumbag looks like, I mean, this scum even styled his eyebrows like Satan's horns. I mean, that's the level of scum you're dealing with, that the coincidence theorists pretend and hallucinate is innocent of all charges. Now, these are the charges, and here is an actual court document. So, this is Aquino vs. Stone, sued under the Administrative Procedure Act, Civil A number 90-1547A. You can find this on casetext.com. Now, here's the relevant part here. So, this is going to send the coincidence theorists into conniptions. So, and the corruption exposing here, I mean, this cover-up is so blatant. This matter came before the court on defendant's motion for summary judgment. The Secretary of the Army asserts that the plaintiff has failed to state a claim under the Privacy Act because the ROIs are exempt. Although the San Francisco Police Department closed its investigation and filed no charges against the plaintiff or anyone else, the CID investigators drafted an investigative plan for the plaintiff's case. After the investigation, the evidence was reviewed by LTC Schwender, staff judge advocate for the Presidio. He determined that there was probable cause to title LTC Aquino with offenses of indecent acts with a child, sodomy, conspiracy, kidnap, and false swearing. And so, what's curious is there was a recommendation by corrupt scum here. So, amendment request was reviewed internally. Colonel Gilligan, who reviewed the amendment request, recommended deleting the plaintiff from several charges which had been investigating. The commanding general of the CID adopted those recommendations September 90. However, plaintiff remains titled for indecent acts with a child, sodomy, conspiracy, kidnapping, indecent acts, and false swearing. So all of the coincidence theorist goof bootlicking scum who pretend that there was no evidence of any of this satanic ritual abuse. I mean, this is all in court documentation. And these pathetic individuals are still all over social media, these just conspiracy deniers pretending and hallucinating it was just a bunch of kids that made up a few stories. I mean, imagine how much of a scum human being you have to be to pretend all these victims just made stuff up, as if these young children were exposed. Where were they exposed to all of this satanic imagery that they were able to replicate in all of these drawings? And I mean, obviously not every single, like, a lot of goofs claim, oh, everybody would have to be in on it. That's the cope of some of these brain dead goofs. Obviously not. Obviously there are good people everywhere. And they're not going to go along with this level of Illuminati satanic filth and exploitation of children. So that's why we have these receipts, because not everybody is evil in the U.S. military. Not everybody is evil in the U.S. government. There are good apples out there. There might not be a lot. There might not be a ton. It might not be the absolute overwhelming majority, but they're out there. The world isn't that far gone where every single one of them is complicit and accessory to satanic ritual abuse. So, yeah. Clark Rice in the chat says, hey, Bruce, want to take a guess if Aquino has ties to West Point? I don't want to spend too much time on Aquino. I just wanted to highlight this because I also have that multi-hour deep dive into documented, prosecuted cases of satanic ritual abuse, also overlapping snuff films. Because a lot of goofs think there's no such thing as snuff films and that criminals would never film their crimes. I mean, just the level of goofery, just the mental disability of these coincidence theorists. I mean, it's so mind-shocking that goofs hallucinate that criminals would never film their crimes and sell the films. I mean, were they born yesterday? I mean, the level of criminality in the world that exists. There are evil people in the world, and some of them want to make money. It's really not that shocking. Oh man. Yeah. Wow. Clark Rice saying the daycare center here at West Point? There was funny business at the daycare at West Point. I'm not sure I even want to know about that. That sounds dark. The Bohemian Grove crowd, it's an interwoven web. Yeah, there's a lot of evil out there. Clark Rice says, I believe Aquino was stationed at the Presidio when Zodiac was active. That's a good question. Some people have been investigating that. Welcome, Sage Lake. But yeah, I mean, it's just hard to believe there's still these brain-dead coincidence theorist goofs out there who deny that there is this type of ritual abuse and exploitation going on within the government with high-ranking military members. Because if it's all true and corruption exists in the world, obviously they would at least try to cover it up, wouldn't they? I mean, this isn't rocket science. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be 100% successful all the time, because as you see here, occasionally good people go on record. Okay, anyway, so let's get to the stats I was talking about before, because a lot of goofs want to just throw away the stats. By saying, out of all these reported missing, a lot of them are, show up or are found later, but a lot of them aren't. And I want to specifically highlight one source here. Okay, here we go. So, there was actually a White House conference. Now, of course, this has been scrubbed from the internet, but luckily we have the archives. So this is George W. Bush-WhiteHouseArchives.gov. And let me get this on the screen. I mean, the coincidence theorists are not even going to be able to catch their breath from all the conniptions they're going to be having from this episode. Not going to give these goofs a chance to catch their breath with just the amount of receipts here. Alright, so here's the archive of this site. Put it on the screen in a second here. Okay. Just get this part highlighted here. Now, obviously, these are just their estimates, so the numbers could actually be far worse than this. So, coincidence theorists, brace yourselves. So, once again here, this is georgebush-whitehouse.archives.gov. Missing exploited runaway children. So let's look here what it says right here. According to the Department of Justice, almost 800,000 children are reported missing to law enforcement each year, while another 500,000 go missing without being reported to authorities. So it doesn't say exactly how they got this number. So I don't know if this is they were called in to maybe missing and exploited runaway children, charities, all these support groups, but there's no police report. So is that how they determine that? So there's no police report, but a report of them missing. It says reported missing to authorities. So to the POPO. So that doesn't mean they weren't reported to non-authorities. So again, the coincidence theorist goofs, the corruption deniers, the scum that deny child victims, they say that, oh, okay, the problem's not that bad because out of these 800,000, most are intentional runaways, which even if that's true, I don't think that's true, but let's say that's true. What happens to them after they run away? Are these coincidence theorist goofs hallucinating none of them? Are put into trafficking rings or kidnapped after they run away of their own accord? Just because they weren't kidnapped from a street corner or from their house, which many were, that doesn't mean they don't end up being trafficked down the line. I mean, just the level of goofery from these... I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm not sure if this is mental disability or what it is. And so there's an additional 500,000. So we're well over 1 million. Now, of the 800,000, even if a large percentage of them are found again, and who knows in what state, who knows, after they were trafficked and exploited, whatever, but even if not, so out of that 800,000, I mean, what? Even if it's only another 100 or 200,000 that are never found, I mean, that's a staggering number. But in addition to that number, there's also another 500,000, which these coincidence theorists scum don't care about. It's not a problem that on top of all the reported to authorities children, there's 500,000 who are not reported to law enforcement. I mean, this is just evil on a level that's just incomprehensible. So you have an additional 500,000 that the police don't know about that go missing. And so there's no number on how many of those are ever found. Are none of them ever found? Maybe some of them are found. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands. And these goof scum think that there is no actual, human trafficking, kidnapping children problem in the United States. I mean, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I mean, again, just the level of goofery from coincidence theorists. I mean, it's evil goofery, and it enables all of this to continue because corruption deniers, these coincidence theorist corruption deniers, they think that there's no problem within these government trafficking rings, these corrupt police, corrupt child protection services, and ironically titled agents. I mean, they think that there's no issue here. I mean, this is crazy. And for whatever reason, these goofs, they think that the Johnny Gosch conspiracy theories are all silly because it's all, made up nonsense that children are kidnapped. I mean, just the level of goofery here. I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy. And just to, again, let's keep the coincidence theorists writhing in their conniptions with all the receipts here. We have to mention Nancy Schaefer, of course, the former Georgia senator who was killed for exposing CPS and just the corruption of child trafficking within CPS. Quote from her, "The system cannot be trusted. It does not serve the people. It obliterates families and children simply because it has the power to do so." I'm not sure it's just simply because of that. With all asked, what year is this stat? 2023? No, this is an old stat. So this would be... what is the date here? Is there a date? Oh, that's curiosity. This is from the Bush administration. So this is... yeah, this would be the early 2000s. So yeah, the numbers could be much, much higher now. Yeah, this is early 2000s. So the numbers could be far higher now. That's a good point. Yeah, I don't know if there's an updated stat on that. On how many are not reported. But we're talking staggering numbers here. I think it's 2003. I see a 2003 reference here. I'm not sure it was exactly 2003. It looks to be approximately 2003. Okay. So, regarding Nancy Schaefer, though, how many people are not aware of Nancy Schaefer? So let's get another receipt here for all the goofs who think that this is just all nothing. This is straight from Senate.gov. Let me get this next receipt. I mean, coincidence theorists are just, let's not let them breathe. The amount of conniption these scum goofs that deny child suffering are in, with all of these receipts. I mean, and they deserve it all. I mean, what kind of human being denies children suffering and claims it's all fake? I mean, this is crazy. And this is just what was discovered in their probe. So there could be plenty more that has not been discovered. Again, that's something coincidence theorists goofs. They don't have the basic logic to understand. This is only reporting what was discovered. So this is a 2023 report right here I'm going to put on the screen in a second. So this is a 2023 report. So again, here's the link here, Senate.gov press release. So this was Senator Ossoff's probe in 2023 uncovers 1,790 children in Georgia DFCS's care were reported missing between 2018 and 2022. So these are only the ones that were reported missing. So this does not include those who went missing without being reported missing. And this is only between 2018 and 2022 in Georgia. And only in the DFCS's care. So this doesn't include anything else. Only within the DFCS's care, and only those who were reported missing. Can you imagine the true numbers here? I mean, coincidence theorists can't. But if these are what was officially reported and officially discovered in these probes, how many weren't? I mean, these are all just staggering numbers. Absolutely staggering. Oh, man. Shelley Klein in the chat says, Kathy Shank, who found the missing tip on Rick Allen, worked for CPS in Delphi for over 20 years. What a coincidence. Yeah. I mean, no shortage of those in any of these cases. Yeah, so again, these are just the officially discovered and reported stats. So obviously the real number is higher. The question is how much higher? Is it a little higher or is it a whole lot higher? I mean, it's just so staggering here, because a lot of goofs, a lot of these coincidence theorist goofs and corruption deniers, they were denying that there was any of this stuff going on. They, in their feeble minds, they think that it might just be, just a couple, some kind of single-digit type situation where it's negligible, not that it's, widespread within government. Maybe it's not widespread to the point where it's like, half of all children. Hopefully it never gets there, but it's going to keep getting higher as long as these coincidence theorist scum bootleggers deny this level of corruption, satanic ritual abuse, etc. So Schaefer was murdered March 26, 2010 in her home. A CPS anti-CPS advocate. And so can you imagine, so based on what she discovered, she was murdered off of what she discovered, but can you imagine what she hadn't discovered? Her husband was also murdered as well. So, I mean, this is a former senator telling you that the government can't be trusted. I mean, this is somebody who was actually on the inside with a conscience. So, anyway, I just wanted to go over that first, just to, to check the coincidence theorist goofs that deny that all of this goes on and that there's no kind of widespread government trafficking. I mean, are there any goofs out there who still maintain that the CIA didn't traffic drugs throughout the 80s and 90s? I mean, just the level of goofery here of these bootlicking statist scum who deny that government officials do anything bad. Or if they do, it's just, one here and there acting alone. Just crazy goofery. Alright, so let's get into the America's Most Wanted footage. So there was a documentary series that licensed some of this footage of, so this was Beth Holloway and Johnny Gosch. Fair use here. We're going to go over some of the footage here, and then we'll go over additional clips that I found. Fair use, obviously, here.
In Iowa, the disappearance of a 12-year-old paperboy spawns a groundbreaking search and rumors of a sinister conspiracy.
Ran chills down the spine. She's like, this can't be happening.
Now, on Vanish.
In 2005, I got the call.
1980.
Bring the missing home and criminals to justice.
Coming up, West Des Moines, Iowa, 1982. 12-year-old Johnny Gosch Gosch has a Sunday morning paper route. Until one morning, he vanishes.
A young boy delivering newspapers, which every God-fearing American kid wants to do, ends up disappearing.
As the search for Johnny unfolds, a terrifying theory emerges.
They were kidnapping and selling children.
Human trafficking is driven by money, more money, and more money.
Beth Holloway sets out to learn the truth about the heartbreaking and groundbreaking search for Johnny Gosch.
We put this picture on a milk carton. That was the very first one that ever took place.
When a child is missing, parents will cling to any information that gives them hope. But one family's 30-year mission to find their son has brought them face to face with evidence almost too shocking to believe and too frightening to ignore.
What does everybody think of Beth Holloway? So, Beth Holloway is Natalie Holloway's mother, and she actually went out with John Ramsey. So I wonder, especially with this episode, where she's hosting this show, and all of this information and evidence coming out of these trafficking rings, etc. I wonder what she knows about John Ramsey, because of course John Ramsey's father, there's the whole North Fox Island fiasco and all of that a lot of coincidence theorists, goofs want to pretend just can't be related. The Nancy Krebs account, the Fleet White connections, etc. The coincidence theorists all maintain it's all mere coincidence, but Beth Holloway, so I don't know exactly how long they dated, but I wonder how much she knows about John Ramsey, and if she suspects he's connected to some kind of rings. I mean, what does this mean for this particular episode as well with Johnny Gosch? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure she has some kind of thoughts on John Ramsey.
West Des Moines, Iowa, 1982. Fifth grader Johnny Gosch is his parents' pride and joy.
Johnny was a great kid, do anything for anybody.
He was a delightful little guy, so happy and just fun to have in the house, and he would be so kind to other people as he started to grow up.
At the age of 12, Johnny decides he wants to make some money. He begs his parents to take on a paper delivery route.
What was he saving for?
He was saving for a dirt bike.
I know you had to be so proud of his decision to take on a paper route to earn money.
He was a special kid.
Johnny's parents agreed to the paper route with one condition.
The only thing that I said was that one of us, the parents, his dad or myself, had to be with him when he did the route, because he was getting out before daylight, going out in the dark.
You know what else is kind of curious? So I actually didn't even think of this before. Huh. So, hold on a second. I didn't really think of this before, but now I'm kind of starting to think that they're definitely, I mean, not that I wasn't thinking it before, but so this is September 5th, 82, or even prior, however many times he delivered papers prior to the disappearance. So this is 82. I mean, this is back in 82. I mean, a lot of people in a lot of areas didn't even lock their doors. I mean, children roamed the streets. There wasn't this level of exposure in the media about kidnappers. Because again, this is before the widespread milk carton missing kids, which that's a whole nother conspiracy that needs its own episode. But so this is 82 and prior. I mean, for whatever reason, I mean, it doesn't say here who agreed to what. Was it Noreen who was saying that he has to be accompanied, and why? So she's saying, okay, it's at the crack of dawn, before the crack of dawn. I wonder if there was some other reason. I mean, maybe just intuition. Or did she have her suspicions of Leonard Gosch, Johnny's father? Did she have some kind of suspicions even before he went missing? That'd be an interesting question for Noreen. But I'm just trying to think of it now, just because the way she's outlining it now, she did not want him alone. She did not want him alone, and this is 82 and prior. I'm just thinking, I wonder if she had certain suspicions before Johnny went missing. So the Missing Children Milk Carton program started December 1984. I thought it was a little earlier than that. I'm trying to nail down it is exactly the year. So Eaton Pat's 79, Adam Walsh 81. So in 84, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was founded. So in 84, Anderson Erickson Dairy in Des Moines, Iowa began printing the photographs of two boys, Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin. Interesting. And then similar milk carton advertising programs started in Chicago. And then they spread from there nationwide from December 84, January 85, and onward. Okay, so yeah, this was before all that. So why, I wonder if there was something else that, I wonder if there was some other reason that she was so worried. Did she know anything about the Des Moines Register? Because there were all these other attempted kidnappings, but most of them were after his. So yeah, you could check out that episode here if you haven't checked out the previous episodes in this series, the most comprehensive on this case.
But on Sunday, September 5th, 1982, Johnny decides to do the paper route by himself. At 5:45.
And so it looks like they left out a detail here. Again, if you haven't seen the previous episodes, supposedly Noreen never agreed to this. And Leonard, Johnny's father, supposedly his non-biological father, he said that Noreen was okay with it. So he basically lied. So Johnny, I mean, we have bits and pieces of the story. You can check out the previous episodes. But supposedly, Noreen never gave him permission. And he didn't decide it on his own. Supposedly, Leonard John Gosch was the one who said he could. Again, this is Mindshock. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. The motto here, of course, is the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. But that is one of the reports on how that all went down.
A.m. While his parents sleep, Johnny slips out of the house. An hour later, the phone rings at the Gosch residence.
It was a neighbor saying they didn't get their paper. And they said, "What's wrong? Is Johnny running late today?" And it was the first time it ever happened.
Johnny's father immediately begins searching the neighborhood.
I went out and started looking, going from block to block, and didn't see anything. And kept looking and looking and looking, and I knew something wasn't right. Didn't know what, but something wasn't right. And that's when the panic set in.
Is anybody buying this story? Is anybody buying this story? Because if the panic set in, why did he deliver all the papers when he found them instead of looking for his son? Yes, obviously this is all fair use all the time here on Mindshock. So, yes, he apparently, as soon as he found Johnny's wagon with the newspapers, instead of looking for his son, instead of calling the Popo, instead of doing any of these things that a supposedly panicked father would do, he decided to finish delivering all the newspapers. So does anybody buy his revisionist story here, where he's saying panic is setting in when he's out looking? I mean, what kind of panicked father decides to just finish delivering all the newspapers? Ducking felonies, you didn't know that detail? Yeah. I'm actually surprised he actually agreed to do this documentary, because he did some interviews early on, but then he kind of disappeared for a while. And Noreen Gosch, actually, supposedly the reason they divorced soon after supposedly Leonard botched a raid on the Kerr farm where there was the tip that that Johnny had been held there. So there, again, you can check out the previous episodes for all that. I don't want to go over all of it here, the Kerr farm incident. But, yeah.
Johnny's father came back and said, "He's gone." His wagon at the corner, full of papers. The bundles have not even been cut. Something is definitely wrong.
The Gosches track down the other paper boys that work with Johnny, and they tell a terrifying story.
The paper carrier saw this person in this Ford Fairmont stop, back up, and talk to Johnny.
The guy said, "Hey, kid, where's 86th Street?" And Johnny turned to the older boy and said, "There's something wrong with this guy." He said, "I'm scared, I'm going home."
According to the paper carriers, as soon as Johnny started walking away, another stranger began following him on foot.
We don't feel that Johnny even realized he was being followed because the man stayed away.
This reenactment here does not appear to be accurate. Supposedly the guy was behind some tall bushes or something following him, not walking directly behind like this. Again, I went over all of this with visualizations and maps and all that in the early episodes, so you can check out the previous 9 episodes here for all the details on how all of this went down.
Fearing something terrible has happened, the Gosches contact the police.
The officer at the time knew that this wasn't a runaway. This is something that was serious, so he called in area officers to come in and start doing a canvass of the neighborhood.
Yeah, this is a highly propagandized documentary piece because the neighbors of the Gosches actually said they were never even interviewed until way, way later. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. I mean, this, no doubt this is going to leave out a lot. I mean, even the corruption within the police force. I mean, Johnny was also spotted talking to an officer in the lead up to this, in the previous days. Either the day before or 2 days before, somewhere around there. I went over it in the early episodes. So which police officer was he talking to? That information has never been released. I mean, this is highly propagandized. I mean, it looks like they're probably going to do some damage control for the cops, but who knows?
The police quickly discovered that a neighbor witnessed what happened to Johnny next. At the end of the block, Johnny was ambushed by the Ford Fairmont and the man seen following him on foot.
The car pulled up, somebody jumped out, and just like that, they both grabbed him, threw him in the car, and they took off, screeching tires and running the stop sign.
I know your heart must have sank, Noreen.
I began calling friends that we had all over the city, asking them to organize search parties to do something.
Yeah, they left out a huge detail here. They actually, that account of the neighbor, the police never made that public. They continued to tell Noreen that Johnny had probably run away. So they had a literal witness to his kidnapping in a vehicle, and they went from that witness and told Noreen he must have ran away. I mean, just the level of scum of these cops here, and the damage control by this documentary is also pretty disgusting. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting here.
We searched all around the Des Moines area. Our basement became a copy center. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of flyers we did send out, but that was part of the first reaction.
The search lasts several weeks, but Johnny isn't found.
You'd pray that they would find something, but you would pray that they didn't. And each time they would come back and didn't find a body, that was reason to be hopeful.
While the police continue searching, the Gosches enlist the help of a private investigator. He puts forth a disturbing theory. That Johnny might have been kidnapped by an organized group of pedophiles.
If you look at these kidnappings, you have to first figure out what type of kidnapping is it.
You know what else nobody talks about? How come the cops never consider any of these theories? It's like they're so focused on, oh, he must have run away of his own accord, or he must have went to go party at a friend's house or something like they usually do. How often do they actually consider the possibility that he was nabbed by a ring? A ring that might also include corrupt cops. No matter how many times it happens, that's never even a consideration. I mean, who knows how many kids could be saved if they at least considered the possibility. Not that they thought that that's what was happening, but they left that avenue open for investigation, so if it were true, they'd be able to jump on it. I mean, just it's always interesting how the police are never the ones who even consider these theories. I mean, a lot more cases would be solved if they did.
Is it a parental or custodial kidnapping? Is it a pedophilia type kidnapping?
Taking kids for prostitution rings, pornography rings, whatever. Friend, chills down the spine, you know, it's like, this can't be happening.
But 6 months later, in Oklahoma, a bizarre incident gives the theory credence and provides investigators with the first break in Johnny's case.
6 months after Johnny's disappearance, you learn that he is alive. What happened?
This woman was at a convenience center, and a young boy came running up to her and screamed, "I am Johnny Gosch. Please help me. I've been kidnapped." Before the woman could do anything, 2 men came around the side of the building, grabbed him, put him back in a car, and then took off.
Police are unable to track down the car or its passengers. And despite the sighting in Oklahoma, 2 years pass without any new leads. Then, on August 12, 1984, 13-year-old Eugene Martin is abducted from the streets of West Des Moines.
When someone first submitted a comment, I appealed to incredulity. But since then, I've actually been doing some digging into Ashton Kutcher. Anybody thinks this is Ashton Kutcher? Now, before the coincidence theorist goofs jump on this, anybody want to take a guess? Anybody want to take a guess where Ashton Kutcher is from? He's from Iowa. Sure, it's all coincidental. Anyway, let's continue here. I do have a Kutcher P. Diddy expose coming up.
Like Johnny, Eugene is in the middle of his Sunday morning paper route.
The similarities are obvious. Just about the same age, both paper carriers, just about the same time of year.
2 young boys now suddenly vanishing.
It just created panic. People wouldn't let their kids out of the house alone because they didn't know who would be next.
A year and a half after Eugene Martin's disappearance, a third young boy, 13-year-old Mark Allen, also vanishes from the streets of Des Moines.
One of the things that came out of this is that nobody knew how bad the problem was. We had no concept about how many children were being abducted.
The kidnappings prompt the Gosches to take a revolutionary approach to finding their son and to helping others whose children have vanished.
We put his picture on a milk carton. That was the very first one that ever took place.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't really know what to think of this guy. So supposedly there were sightings that he went to like a lot of gay bars. He actually took Johnny to an Air Force base. It was a number of weeks before the disappearance. Some people believe Johnny Gosch was marked for something when Leonard took him to that Air Force base. Again, I go over all of this in the previous episodes. We don't have time to go over it all now.
I remember going to the dairy in Iowa and said, "Hey, can we do this?" And they thought it was a good idea.
The idea takes off. Soon, missing children are being profiled on milk cartons across the country. Many of these children are ultimately found. Not Johnny Gosch.
It's a bad dream. It really is. People would come up and say, "Well, you know, we know how you feel."
Also, again, for those that haven't seen the previous episodes, let's not forget that this is the guy that actually had a stand-in for his own wife. Actually, real quick here for those, just another teaser here. Some people believe that this is Johnny Gosch in a photo with George H.W. Bush. This boy has never been identified. He does not look happy. I don't know why he's randomly with H.W. here. Some people allege that there was part of some kind of White House trafficking, etc. And yeah, anyway, you can check out the previous episodes for some deep dives there. But also, Leonard was the guy who had he had someone pretend to be Noreen. I mean, I don't know what kind of a upstanding individual does this. But yeah, let me get the image on the screen. Just give me a second here. YouTube is being a little slow today, like usual. Some people also think that Gannon is Gosch, and just look at the strange behavior between George Bush and Gannon. I mean, this just looks weird. Like, why would you randomly rub the head of an adult man? And just look at the expression on his face. And he somehow got White House credentials, despite not being qualified in any way. But anyway, you could check out the episode on Gannon. Just the amount of coincidences in this case is just absolutely staggering. Oh, and people who think that head rub wasn't damning enough. I mean, look at this. Also kissing his head. What is going on here? Why does he have this weird obsession with Gannon? Anyway, let's I mean, just the amount of strangeness in this case. Trying to get this image here. 4, 3. And connected to the White House here, I mean, it's well documented that there was this homo prostitution ring. And apparently, these individuals also drew restricted areas. These kids drew restricted areas of the White House that they could not have been in. So anyway, this is all well documented, despite the coincidence theorists pretending it's not. Well documented. All well documented. So yeah, I just want to get the image here of Leonard Gosch having a stand-in pretend to be Noreen. I mean, it's really weird. I wonder why they didn't ask him about this for this documentary. I mean, this seems like a complete sham propaganda piece. Why can't I find this image? Let's see here. I also won't get into the Franklin scandal, but it's all related, obviously. In Des Moines. Why can I not find this image? I gotta get it. Oh, here we go. So here is Leonard Gosch. This is the same man here having a woman pretend to be his wife. That's obviously not Noreen, but he told everybody she was Noreen. So basically, Leonard Gosch was meeting with Bonacci without telling Noreen. So he was also using this woman. I don't know if she was ever actually identified. So anybody would think, so he was using this woman, and I don't know why this sham documentary didn't ask him about why he was using an imposter to meet with Bonacci in some kind of official capacity so that other people would think that Noreen was actively involved in meeting with Bonacci and in the loop. So this is a man who either hired or somehow got an imposter to pretend to be his wife to give authorities or whoever the appearance that Noreen was in the loop regarding all of the information Bonacci was giving them. Furthermore, Leonard Gosch is supposedly the one who tipped off individuals before a raid that possibly could have yielded evidence of the Gosch kidnapping. So I don't know if anybody's asked this guy any real questions. He also received some kind of shady phone calls that some believe had something to do with the tip-off on which day to take Johnny, because if that was the day that he told him to go alone behind Noreen's back, I mean, it's just really weird. So apparently Leonard never even told Noreen it was at least a year or more than a year before Noreen even found out that Leonard was meeting with Bonacci and getting all of this information on the Gosch kidnapping. So what is I mean, this is just insanity. I mean, this is just absolute insanity. So, I mean, just who goes to these lengths to hire imposters to pretend to be their wife so everyone would think that Noreen was aware of the Bonacci angle in the investigation? And I don't really see anybody talking about this. This is also from the book Who Took Johnny. This isn't a random image on the internet. This is, if you want the exact page number of the book, it's page 89 from Why Johnny Can't Come Home. Okay? I mean, this just doesn't make any sense. I've never seen any other case quite like this. Here's a comment from Mario #1 on the Johnny Gosch subreddit from several years ago, back when there was more solid discussion. To be clear, Noreen has never claimed Leonard was involved, but merely highlighted a great number of suspicious actions on his part that certainly support that inference. By taking the lead in investigating Bonacci's story, Leonard would have gotten out in front of that information, being able to control how it flowed and what was done with it. Simply blowing off DeCamp might have resulted in DeCamp making contact with Noreen directly. Instead, by all appearances, he put on a show of investigating while indefinitely withholding it from his wife. For the other leads, Noreen certainly wouldn't have accepted not investigating them. And Leonard couldn't hide everything from her, nor did these other leads present as much of a risk to him as the Franklin tie-in to make it worthwhile to try. So Leonard's options would have been to sabotage her, making him appear suspicious to his wife for relatively little benefit, or go along with her and get the added benefit of staying in the loop as how the case developed. Also, while being involved does not necessarily mean that he didn't care about or love his son. While I do believe Leonard was complicit, I don't consider him the main perpetrator, and I believe he was blackmailed against his wishes into making Johnny available for kidnapping. The information in Noreen's book hints at that too. he would likely have been torn between wanting Johnny back and or closure about what happened and not wanting his own role to come out. So he might have approved of certain investigative routes while considering others, like Franklin, too risky. No, but this is just kind of crazy, because was he just buying more time by hiring imposters? But this is just crazy. Who hires an imposter to pretend to be their wife while trying to control the investigation and then supposedly sabotaging a raid as a result? I mean, does it get more mind-shocking that this is, I mean, people think that supposedly Johnny visiting Noreen is the most bizarre aspect of this case. Not even close. I think a man hiring an imposter to pretend to be his wife is one of the most bizarre aspects of any missing persons case I've ever heard of. And for whatever reason, this propaganda documentary doesn't ask him about it. Okay, everybody in the chat, wouldn't that be one of your first questions? Why did you have a woman pretend to be your wife? And why did you keep... So apparently he kept the charade for about at least a year before Noreen was ever even informed of Bonacci's existence. Blake Starry in the chat says, this is so bizarre, almost like the father was Manchurian Candidate. How would DeCamp and Bonacci not pick up on the father's strange behavior? I'm not sure they didn't pick up on it. They might have picked up on it. I went over this on one of the first episodes. You can go back and check that out. I extensively went through this entire angle, but I just wanted to mention it again just because this is such a propagandized... How do you not ask him about this? I don't know if anybody's asked him this question. Wouldn't that be one of your first questions? I mean, I can't think... Well, the other question is, why did you finish delivering the newspapers if you were that panicked? That's a little weird. It's almost like he was intentionally... Again, I'm not saying he's involved, but if he were involved, and if this is the reason for hiring an imposter, I mean, maybe there's an innocent reason. I'm not saying there isn't. I don't claim anything is true and true. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation on why a man would hire an imposter to pretend to be his wife while investigating the disappearance of his son. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation. I can't think of any, but maybe there is. Maybe there is, and maybe there's a reasonable explanation on why he would just deliver newspapers instead of calling the police. But if he is complicit, both of these actions sort of make sense. Just saying. Just saying. Not claiming it's true, but just saying. I mean, this is just really weird. This is just really weird. But I just wanted to touch upon that because I'm kind of disgusted with this documentary. So, but let's continue. Obviously, more fair use here. Fair use all the time.
And I would think, no, you don't.
But just when the search for Johnny seems to have hit a dead end, a convicted felon comes forward with a shocking story.
Do you know for sure who abducted Johnny Gosch?
Yes.
In 1982, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch vanishes while delivering his morning paper route. 7 years later, the Gosches are still searching for their son.
There's no time for a pity party when this stuff happens. If parents don't look for their kids, nobody else is going to do it.
Finally, in May of 1989, there's a break in the case. A Nebraska convict by the name of Paul Bonacci tells the police that he knows firsthand what happened to John.
Paul Bonacci said, I helped with the Johnny Gosch kidnapping. I was the one in the car. I was in the back seat. I was the one that jumped out and grabbed Johnny's legs, while the man who followed Johnny grabbed his shoulders.
had a couple of pictures of Johnny, and
You know what's kind of weird, though, again, with coincidence theorist Cope? Like, I could totally understand not knowing if this guy's telling the truth. I mean, I have no idea if he is or he isn't. I mean, obviously, I even have images of his journal entries. He has a lot of information that was never made public. How did he get it? And some of these journal entries are corroborated to have, because they were not in his cell with, I went over this in the first episodes regarding Bonacci. So these were before any of this information was public, and he was actually, none of it, certain pieces of info were never even made public. And he knew all of this information about Johnny, which is crazy. But, I mean, we can go over these in more details. Here's actual screenshots of correspondence here between Paul and supposedly other trafficked and MK Ultra individuals. Now, the other thing, and I mean, we'll go over this in detail a little bit later. So these are actual photographs of his notebook. And I mean, yeah, we can go over those a little later. And what they entail. But anyway, regardless of whether you believe him or not, does he not look the part? If you're looking at a trafficked MK Ultra individual who did very bad things, who was forced to do bad things, and who's seen a lot of darkness, he certainly looks the part, doesn't he? Again, I'm not saying that means that what he's saying is true, but he certainly looks the part. I mean, that's something coincidence. The coincidence theorists can't even, they don't even have the mental wherewithal to even admit that. They have to pretend he's just a disturbed individual saying all this for attention. But somehow he just knows all of these details. I mean, yeah.
they said that this is the one that they wanted to get.
Bonacci says he's part of a vast network of sexual operating across the a network that inspired Bonacci himself when he was a
Paul Bonacci was a victim who was also used. These children, after they have been, they themselves become part and recruit other kids to be put into this. And as long as a boy behaves, he can survive.
Noreen sets up a face-to-face meeting with Paul Bonacci in prison.
I feel so bad about it because what they made me do.
Bonacci broke down and just cried when he saw me. And he said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. But they forced me to."
Noreen is certain she finally knows what happened to her son. But her husband
I mean, okay. So, again, I have no idea what the context of this video is here, but I just do not like the body language here. Again, I don't know the context. I'm not saying it means anything for all the triggered goofs that are going to say that doesn't mean he's guilty. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm not saying he's guilty of anything. I don't know if I've ever seen the father of a missing child have this kind of a weird, casual posture. I mean, again, I don't know the context here. I'm assuming they're filming this some kind of for an interview or documentary or news segment. But his posture here just looks really weird. Blake Starry says, yeah, I remember him being paid out a settlement by the government in a climate that imprisoned those who accused. Yeah, he was paid out, but all of the evidence was sealed. Coincidence theorists who say, oh, that was some kind of weird judgment. Why did they seal all the evidence then? I mean, if there was no actual legitimate evidence that he presented, why did they seal it? That's kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah, he was granted $1 million judgment against Larry King connected to the Franklin scandal, but that was never paid out, though. But clearly that there was a ton of evidence for him to be granted that judgment, especially when he was, because they were saying that he was lying, and all of the kids involved in the Franklin scandal, all of the witnesses were lying, and yet he got paid out. But all the evidence was sealed. All of the evidence was sealed. Yeah, he won the judgment, but I don't think he actually ever received a penny. I don't think there was an actual NDA, though, because Bonacci spoke about it afterwards, right? I don't think there was an NDA, and I don't think it was a settlement. I think it was a ruling, a judgment ruling. I went over it in the earlier episodes. I don't have it in front of me right now. So I don't think there was an NDA, but for whatever reason, the judge ordered the evidence sealed. Because, I mean, Bonacci said a lot of stuff since then, so I don't think there was an NDA.
Isn't so sure.
He was
I almost wish I had seen this before I knew anything about him hiring imposters to pretend to be his wife, about the allegations that he botched a raid against a farm that might have had information where, evidence where Johnny was being held, or that he took Johnny to an Air Force base before the disappearance and all the weird phone calls. What does everybody make of this man's posture, micro expressions, and body language here? Is this a man who's guilty of being blackmailed in some capacity to facilitate the sale of his son? Now, I don't know if there's been a DNA test, so, I mean, he kind of sort of looks like Johnny Gosch, but there were people saying that he's not Johnny's biological father. I haven't seen any substantiating evidence of that. I don't know. But I just saw that being discussed. He kind of looks like him, but, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just everybody kind of had that similar haircut back then. But what does everybody make of the body language here? I guess you could maybe explain it as he's feeling guilt and regret that he didn't go with him that morning. But again, that doesn't explain why he's delivering the papers instead of looking for his son. I mean, nobody would give a flying crap about papers not being delivered if you don't even know where your kid is, especially if you're panicking. If you have a responsible kid that always does what they're supposed to do, and you find a wagon with all the papers not delivered, you as a parent, how many parents are just going to go deliver the papers instead of going to the police and looking for their actual child? And again, I don't know of any parent of a missing child who hired imposters to pretend to be their wife. Anybody have any thoughts on the posture here? The micro expressions? I mean, again, I'm not saying he's guilty of anything. I'm just saying there's a lot of unanswered questions here. And I think there's definitely some questions that need to be asked of him.
saying a lot of things that were kind of hard to believe. I would say about 40% of it was the truth and 60% was made up.
Now, who thinks that Leonard Gosch here has the experience to make that determination? 60-40? Like, where did he pull that out of? Because I think Bonacci specifically made statements about Leonard as well. I don't have all of the documentation in front of me. I'll have to go through it again in another episode. I think he might have referenced that Leonard actually visited some of these bars, if that came from him, or some... I wonder if DeCamp was the one who asked Bonacci about it. Yeah, I'm not sure if Bonacci offered... And that would be curious, what Bonacci told Noreen or DeCamp that he did not tell Leonard. But who knows? But does anybody find it weird that Leonard is just hallucinating percentages of what is or isn't true? Like, how would he know? Like, if Bonacci's saying is true or not? Like, how would Leonard know? Unless this is also some kind of Freudian slip where if Leonard is involved, then he does know what's true or untrue. To a certain extent. I mean, if he wasn't there at the exact time, he might not even know. But if he knows a lot more than he's letting on, perhaps he does have some kind of barometer. Clark Rice says, it's a pretty standard technique to deflect blame when confronted with evidence. Yeah, some is true. Well, I just want to know who hires an imposter to pretend to be their wife. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Clark Rice says, hoping to throw shade and deflect by impeaching the witness. Yes, also known as the genetic logical fallacy. Well, or poisoning the well. Or, I mean, maybe hasty generalization. I mean, and red herring logical fallacy. I mean, there's a lot of logical fallacies there. Duck and Felony says, I'm not even a parent, and I wouldn't waste any time delivering papers if my nephew went missing. I mean, how many people, even a non-blood relative, like a neighbor or a friend of a friend, would you waste time in that situation either? I mean, who would?
Noreen believed this kid 100%, and but I didn't.
In 1992, Bonacci is released from prison and tells his story on the TV show America's Most Wanted.
So here is the footage from America's Most Wanted. So this documentary show with Holloway actually licensed the footage from America's Most Wanted. And here it is. Here's part of it.
As part of the show, Bonacci leads a film crew to an abandoned ranch in where he claims Johnny Gosch and countless other boys were once held captive.
So who caught that right there? So did you see how visibly shaken he was? Look at how visibly shaken he is here. Like, he has to compose himself. It's like if he's acting, I mean, this is brilliant acting. I mean, look at him. Look at his face here. It's like he's in horror at the events that transpired here. Like, he looks physically ill just by being in this location again. I mean, this is tough. I mean, is this just the greatest actor ever? I mean, he looks absolutely ill here just by being here. The energy, the memories. Let's continue. Yeah, trigger warning, it's gonna get real dark here.
This is where they kept hidden away underneath. I almost couldn't do it. I could even go near the house because I got up there and just the memories flooded back of the last time I was here and leaving here, because this was the last place I ever seen Johnny Gosch at.
Shortly after Bonacci's segment airs, Noreen is contacted by a young man named Jimmy Gibson. He also claims to have been at the ranch with Johnny.
Were there any proof of life questions that you could ask Jimmy that he could answer correctly to make sure that you knew it was your Johnny?
I asked and verified about the birthmark that Johnny had on his chest, and Jimmy described the shape of it perfectly. along with other things that Johnny told him that he had in his room. That information had never been in a news story. Never. And Jimmy.
Jimmy Gibson also tells Noreen about a horrible identifying mark that all the boys held captive at the ranch now bear.
The brand is what they call the rocking X. Like a half of a circle, and then there's an X in the center. Jimmy had that brand on his leg. Paul Benassi carries that brand. Jimmy told us that Johnny also carries that brand.
It's a story almost too sadistic to be true, but investigators are already familiar with the notorious Rocking X.
In the underground, we started observing and hearing about the Rocking X in about 1968-69. We had followed it out to somewhere in Colorado where there was a Rocking X operation going on.
Okay, let's take a pause here for the coincidence theorists. Okay, so for the coincidence theorists, so Bonacci just so happens to have this brand, and he just so happens to know where to find this house, which, by the way, there were initials in the basement. I don't know if they're going to show it here in this show, but I have other clips that I found from the actual America's Most Wanted episode where we'll go over to see if they actually show the initials. Now, keep in mind, I went over this in previous episodes as well, but there was also a bathroom in a restaurant in Colorado where one of the Gosch neighbors, coincidentally, believe it or not, was vacationing, and they found initials in the bathroom with Johnny Gosch, and Bonacci also corroborated that story. So that's a lot of coincidences. So the coincidence theorist cope here, what are they thinking? That Bonacci made this all up so he branded himself just to make the story up? Or do the coincidence theorists think Bonacci really was drafted himself and branded for real, but he's making all this stuff up in relation to Gosch? Like, what is the coincidence theorist cope here? Like, how do coincidence theorists explain this? And this is without even getting into all of the shady Colorado business, which, again, you can check out the first episodes in this series. I go over all of the Colorado connections and the Bush family connections. Coincidentally, the Bushes have a ranch and a heavy presence out there. The British royal family had a presence out there. There were people shipping castles out there from Europe. There's cults out there in Colorado, not too far from this house. And this house is supposedly owned by an Air Force official. So, or was. Then apparently it was burned down or something. Now somebody else owns the land and they built another house. But anyway, and I think it was burned down shortly after this episode aired, which is also another coincidence. I'm sure it's all coincidental, right? But does anybody have a guess on how the coincidence theorists explain this brand? I also go over Jimmy Gibson extensively in the previous episode, so you guys can check that out as well. But does anybody... I mean, I'm having trouble on how the coincidence theorists can explain this. Clark Rice says, remnants of the processed church out there? Oh, man. Talk about a rabbit hole there.
That was the last I knew of it. And then when Johnny came along and I saw the Rocking X again, I immediately knew what the Rocking X was.
Jimmy Gibson claims that many of the young boys managed to escape the ranch where Rocking X held them captive. Among them was Johnny Gosch, but Jimmy has no idea where Johnny is now. To Noreen, Jimmy Gibson's story gels with everything she knows about her son's disappearance. Johnny's father doesn't think so.
It was like there was too many lies. being laid out on the table there in front of us.
The differences of opinion, coupled with the strain of losing Johnny, eventually drives a wedge between them. 11 years after their son vanished, Noreen and John Gosch divorce.
Oh, it just tears you apart, basically.
Okay, just call me crazy, but this guy just does not seem trustworthy. I'm not saying he's lying, but all of these shady actions don't make any sense, and I guess they're not, again, in this propagandized documentary, I guess they're not going to touch upon the Kerr farm and raid situation that supposedly the rumor is Leonard tipped them off that law enforcement was going to raid the farm and possibly find evidence of their trafficking network, and possibly Gosch's evidence of Gosch being held there, which according to Bonacci he was. So if, and what lies is Leonard talking about? What did Bonacci lie about? Because Bonacci gave the information, he wasn't the only one. This information on Kerr was corroborated by other law enforcement as well, and there were other... this guy had a criminal record. I mean, I went over all this in previous episodes. I'm not going to go over all of it again. But there's many other non-Bonacci sources that corroborate everything he was saying and the individuals he was naming. So what is Leonard talking about here? And I wonder why Noreen is not more vocal against Leonard. That's another curiosity. I wonder if there's just some other reason we don't know about it. Maybe Noreen just wants to be nice because she thinks Leonard will eventually come clean. Yeah, I wonder if that's it. I wonder if Noreen is just being nice to Leonard and not exposing all of this because she hopes that he's going to come clean one day.
So...
a wedge between them. 11 years after their son vanished, Noreen and John Gosch divorce.
Oh, it just tears you apart, basically. So, especially when you got opinions, each of us had opinions of what may have happened or how it happened or who could have been involved.
Years pass, and the Gosches are still no closer to finding their son. But according to Noreen, one night in 1997, a miracle happens.
There was a knock on your door.
I said, "Who is it?" He said, "It's me, Mom, it's Johnny. Can I come in?" And I knew it was him. I could feel that it was him.
Now he's a 27, 28-year-old man.
Yes. And I thought he was home to stay.
But according to Noreen, Johnny tells her it's unsafe for him to even be talking to her. And just 3 hours after walking back into his mother's life, Johnny vanishes again.
He said, "I can't stay. I'm only here for a short time. I need your help. I want these men arrested so that we can live freely."
As soon as Noreen Gosch makes the encounter public, Johnny's father questions its validity.
You know what's really crazy too? Like, let's say you're the father and you're innocent. Would you publicly question the validity of your grieving wife and the mother of your... Like, even if you really found it unbelievable, like, why would you do that unless you're trying to cover something up? I mean, this whole case is really, really dark. Supposedly, this random CIA asset gets involved after this, and he botches the entire So supposedly, this individual claiming to be Johnny gave Noreen all of this info and names. And in making the so as soon as people in Washington D.C. heard about this, the FBI and the D.C. people, someone threw a wrench in all of this, because supposedly Johnny, I mean, this is what's really sad. This is what is so sad about this. It seems like Johnny and some of these other kids, they put together enough evidence to actually take all these people down. And then insiders botched this entire takedown investigation, so that way Johnny could never actually come forward and come out of hiding, etc. But it looks, and John DeCamp exposed all. Some people think DeCamp is a compromised shill. I never saw that much to substantiate that. I mean, because he did a lot of work in promoting all of this. Now, if he was some kind of gatekeeper shill and he was told he can go up to a certain point and no further, I mean, who knows? But it's just, I don't know. I've never seen anything super damning, and Ted Gunderson as well. People say he's a shell. I've never seen anything actually that damning where to prove that. But I mean, who knows? Again, I do not claim anything is true or untrue. But I mean, just look at Leonard Gosch here. I mean, it just, none of his actions are making any sense if he's innocent.
I was hoping it was true, but the way that she described it, it did not seem very believable.
Okay, I have to stop this here again. It didn't seem very believable at all. Based on what? Now, look, notice here he looks down. Down and to the left, almost as if in shame. Almost as if in shame, like he doesn't want to be saying what he's saying. Like, what would the story have to be in order to be believable according to Leonard? Like, if Johnny really did come back and talk to her, and notice how he didn't come to talk to Leonard. Now, I actually thought the story was more unbelievable before I found out that this wasn't random. Noreen actually went on a show, I think 2 weeks prior, and begged Johnny to come see her. And if I remember correctly, I'm not sure if Noreen was still living at their old house. I don't know if Leonard was at the old house and Noreen had a new address, which she mentioned on that show, because apparently Johnny did not want to go see Leonard. He wanted to see his mom, and is that telling as well, if that's legit? Dynamo Arts in the chat says, it's like you always say, Bruce, what are the odds that all of Leonard's shady acts over decades and him not being involved are just a coincidence? Look at this man's face right here in this image. Is this deception and shame? Is this deception and shame? Blake Starry says, I was always unsure of this encounter. I wonder what mental state she was in by this point. Well, you know what's curious? There's been so much corroboration on what Johnny looked like. And, for example, by the time he went to see her, I think I have an image here of the sketch she gave police. So apparently he looked like this. He was darker, tanner, and had long hair. I think it was Gibson, again, forgive me if I get the details a little wrong. I'm not sure if it was Jimmy Gibson or someone else that said that Johnny was hiding out on a Native American reservation, which would kind of make sense because U.S. law enforcement doesn't have jurisdiction there. That'd be sovereign native land. So this is the sketch that Noreen had, and this was, I believe, before the information about either from Gibson or other individuals that later came forward that claimed Johnny was on a Native American reservation. That was after the fact, if I have my timeline correct. Or maybe it was before. I don't even remember. But it was interesting because it matches up with her description. Because this sketch here, this sketch looks like this guy might be able to fit in a Native American reservation. What's also kind of curious, though, is hold on a second here. I don't want to spend hours on the Gannon rabbit hole, but I don't know, man. Maybe. Alright, anyway, let's continue here. Just check the chat. Here, Blake Starr says, I think his face would have changed more than that. Blake Starr says, speaking of appearance, people think Kutcher is Gosch. No. People think... Here's another comparison of Johnny and Gannon. Pretty close. Pretty close, whether it's him or not. No, people think Eugene Martin could be Kutcher. This is Eugene Martin. Kutcher also coincidentally from Iowa, but... yeah. Eugene Martin doesn't really look like Gosch, but... I mean, maybe from a distance, but...
all.
Has Noreen's grief deluded her about the truth surrounding her son's disappearance? It seems that way until one day in 2008, when Noreen receives an anonymous letter containing a chilling set of pictures.
I pulled out this picture of Johnny bound and gagged, and I literally could not get my breath. There were two other pictures in the packet. One had 3 boys laying on a bed, all bound and gagged.
Are the pictures real? The boys in the photos bear no sign of the Rocking X brand, nor do they resemble the 2 missing Des Moines boys, Mark Allen and Eugene Martin. But one of them does bear a strong likeness to Johnny.
Wait a second, how would you see the brand, though? I mean, their shoulders and legs are covered, so... and their back, depending on... some people say there were different spots they could have been branded, but... how would they have... oh, in one of the other photos... And this also could have been when... before they were taken to the ranch to be branded.
rocking X brand, nor do they resemble the two missing Des Moines boys, Mark Allen and Eugene Martin. But one of them does bear a strong likeness to Johnny. Noreen is convinced it's him.
I took my photos to the police department, and when I opened up the folder and they saw the pictures, they kept saying, "Oh my God, it's Johnny, it's Johnny, it's Johnny."
However, authorities will not publicly confirm the boy in the photo is Johnny, and many people familiar with the case, including Johnny's father, doubt their authenticity.
I could tell it wasn't him.
What does that mean? I can tell. How can he tell? I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, that's just kind of weird. I mean, I don't know. If you look up compromised in the dictionary with this, and you saw this guy's face there, would you doubt it? Again, I'm not saying anything is true or untrue, but if you just looked up compromised in the dictionary and you saw this guy's face, would that be incongruous? Yeah, ducking felonies, it's actually sicker than that, because they were pretending that those photos were some kind of a prank and they weren't even of a real abduction. And then eventually, and the coincidence theorist ate that up for years, until finally the investigator who claimed they were fake, I think it was in Florida, he eventually admitted he never really did an investigation. I mean, you will not believe the goofery and incompetence in this case. And of course, all of the coincidence theorist goofs they just lapped it all up as if, oh yeah, some guy said they were fake. That must mean it was fake because some guy said they were fake, whether it's Johnny or not. Like, it's just so crazy, just the level of goofery.
And didn't have to go any further. Something to do with his shape of his ankles and his legs. I know he had long legs, but it just, something wasn't right. He was 5'7", and looking at that kid, I would probably put him in at about 5'4". It just wasn't him.
Wait, so all of a sudden, Leonard Gosch is an expert at identifying height in bound children with bent legs. All of a sudden, Leonard, I mean, why even have police? Why don't they just hire Leonard to do all these IDs? Clearly, he's such an expert with so much experience in identifying individuals in photos. I mean, this guy he's putting exact metrics to the inch of bound individuals in grainy photographs. I mean, why has the FBI not snatched this expert up? I mean, they should be paying him the big bucks. He can tell how tall people with bent legs in random grainy photographs are. I mean, it's one thing to doubt that it's him, that's fine. But to start giving exact measurements? This is really bizarre. Like, of course you could say, oh, it doesn't look like him, the shape, but to start giving exact measurements? What? Does anybody... This is so weird. This is very consistent with deception, where you start making up exact details to justify the deception. This is weird. I've never seen a missing persons case where a father hires an imposter to pretend to be his wife. I've never seen a case where a father finishes delivering newspapers or finishes whatever instead of looking for their child. I've never seen a case where the parent of a missing child starts giving exact measurements of people in photographs. Like in the Tara Calico case where there's a photograph, none of the parents were like, oh no, she's this foot, this many inches, and the person in the photograph is clearly this much and this many inches. Like, how would you even determine the exact inch? It's so weird. I mean, why have law enforcement agencies not snatched up this absolute photo analyst expert in height? Dynamo Art says he's stonewalling and obfuscating as much as the cops, all bound by fear into this horror. I mean, you can kind of see it in his eyes, too. Like, there's something not right with everything he's saying. Blake Starry says this is the plot of some kind of deranged film. Yeah, it actually gets much worse, because in the background of the photograph, there's some kind of a poster with the wrong year, because the investigator that said that this was faked, he said he investigated some other case, but the year doesn't match in the poster. The case that he investigated was a different year, so it couldn't have been. And eventually the investigator admitted it, but for years the coincidence theorists believed that these photos were all of a random prank.
Whether the photos are real or not, one fact remains. Nearly 30 years have passed since Johnny Gosch disappeared on his Sunday morning paper route. And in the decades since Johnny first appeared on the now legendary milk carton, a lot has changed. Both in the way sexual predators network with each other, and in the way law enforcement hunts them down.
The interesting thing about that is on the computer, no matter when you punch that key, somebody can follow it.
What do you hope for your future, Noreen?
I hope I live long enough to bring some resolution to these cases, to help these young boys so they can be free one day and just live a normal life.
We can find terrorists in, God, unbelievable parts of this world, but we can't find a kidnapper in West Des Moines, Iowa?
I always still think of Johnny as a 12-year-old instead of 41 years old, what it would be today.
Check out this guy constantly licking and wetting his lips on that statement. All clear signs of deception. I wonder exactly what they said before, because he clearly got really nervous at that point.
Walking down the streets, I'm looking at faces and trying to think, what do you... But down deep, I'm still looking at a 12-year-old. And that's a hard thing.
Johnny Gosch was last seen in West Des Moines, Iowa in September of 1982. He has light brown hair, blue eyes, and a birthmark on his chest. He may also bear the Rocking X brand. Today, Johnny would be 42 and may resemble the man depicted in this age progression photo. Mark Allen has brown hair and blue eyes. He would be 39 years old. Eugene Martin would be 40. He has brown hair and brown eyes. If you have about Johnny Gosch, Eugene Martin, or Mark Allen, please go to My Lifetime. If you have information about Johnny Gosch, Eugene Martin, or Mark Allen, please go to mylifetime.com/vanished and click on the tips button.
What is the Johnny Gosch law, Noreen?
Johnny Gosch law was created to ensure immediate investigation on a missing child rather than waiting 72 hours.
And how many states to date have adopted?
7 that I know of, and there may be more that have added throughout the country, but at the time, that's what our push was, is to get at least the states throughout the Midwest on it.
Wow, that's kind of disgusting that not all states have adopted that. I wonder why. In the chat here, Blake Star says, I've never looked into body language. Is there a definitive guide? Yes, there is. I actually go over it in the Jeff Gannon episode in this very same Johnny Gosch series, so check that out. I go over the body language expert guide, and then I analyze Gannon's interview. And it's all there, so you can check that out step by step. Dynamo Art says, someone has identified Leonard as a big nasty perv frequenting traffic center bars. Yeah, more than one individual. For some reason, I'm remembering that Bonacci actually, for some reason, I think Bonacci, somebody might have asked Bonacci about it, whether he had seen Leonard or knew about Leonard visiting those bars. Clark Rice says, most definitely body language experts are key to interpreting interrogations where there are a lot of deception, clues, stress indicators, emphasis ticks, phrasing, and breathing pauses. Yeah, there's a lot to it. It's not 100% like anything because it's kind of dependent on the individual. But there's a lot there because micro expressions in particular, you can't control them. So even if you're trying to lie, now if you're a complete sociopath, I mean, and you're just a stone cold killer with a poker face, then maybe there's not a lot there, but most people don't fall into that category. That's very rare. So for most people, there are a lot of clues that, I mean, it's just biological responses. So, okay, let's go over some clips here from the actual America's Most Wanted video. And does anybody else think it's very telling that they tried to scrub this entire video from the internet?
Sighting, but Johnny.
So this is all that remains.
But Johnny's never been found. 2 years. But Johnny's never been found. 2 years ago, a convicted child molester surfaced and said he helped kidnap Johnny. Bonacci claims that an organized ring of pedophiles abducts children and forces them into a life of child pornography and prostitution, and that it happened to him.
America's Most Wanted was focused on missing children because our host, John, had had his son abducted and killed. And so we did a lot of stories about missing children, and as the anniversary approached of Johnny's abduction, it was one of those stories we wanted to look at.
Nobody had found Johnny, so any excuse is a good excuse to keep it in the light.
We didn't know who we were going after, and we had a missing child who'd been missing for 10 years. And the FBI was waving us off right from the very beginning, saying these are not credible witnesses, we don't believe this information is valid. So we went into it pretty skeptically. Particularly when you have a character like Paul Bonacci, who was clearly suffering from multiple personality disorder, who had huge credibility issues.
You know what's kind of crazy? The coincidence theorist Cope here, if he has multiple personality disorder, that's clearly consistent with somebody who's been under psychological operations, MK Ultra programming, experienced severe trauma. That's all consistent. How would that be a point against him? Wouldn't that be a point for his authenticity? I mean, just the level of cope from coincidence theorist bootleggers here. Also, the FBI saying he's not credible. Why are they saying he's not credible? Are they trying to do damage control and divert away from their operations? Or certain individuals within the FBI? These same scum that allowed Epstein to operate with impunity, these same scum, like after, I mean, how many hundreds of victims came forward in the Epstein case and nothing was ever done? These investigators are the same ones saying Bonacci's not credible? I mean, this is weird.
and who had been in prison.
These people, when they get a hold of young kids and stuff, you know, they force you to do things, and they photograph it, they film it, and the whole purpose for that is to either blackmail you into staying with them or to split your mind up so that you don't even remember who you are.
Paul Bonacci's a tough read. There were so many facts that he seemed to know that lots of people didn't know. And the Gosches were convinced that the only way Paul knew those facts was if he had talked to Johnny.
Paul claims to have seen Johnny in 1986 on a trip to Colorado, where Johnny was being kept by a man called the Colonel.
I guess he tried to run away from it one time and they branded him.
We gave some airtime to Paul Bonacci's story. He talked about the branding. He talked about what were pretty amazing accusations. And then these kids started calling us. This one kid came forward named Jimmy who had the brand and was telling these stories and confirming what Bonacci was talking about. We went to Colorado with Bonacci. You know, he said, "I'll show you the house where they used to keep us." And he described this house with a secret underground chamber where they would hide the kids when the police would come.
Okay, let's take another pause for the coincidence theorists. Are the coincidence theorists still in conniptions? Are they still in conniptions? So what are the chances, because from the street, does this look like a house that has a random underground chamber? Like if you were just driving around, would you randomly pick out this house? And apparently this house was owned by an Air Force officer. So for the people saying, well, maybe Bonacci had been there before, even though he wasn't trafficking, how would he have randomly known an Air Force officer while he's spending time in prison across the country? I mean, how do the coincidence theorists explain this? Blake Starry, were you here from the beginning? There's way more than 2,000 a year. And there's another 500,000 a year that are never reported to law enforcement in the first place. Watch this from the beginning. I put all the receipts on the screen from the Department of Justice, all from government sources.
And there it was.
So what happened here?
God. I remember this house being where they brought us. They kept us here and made sure that we couldn't leave, and I almost couldn't do it to even go near the house because I got up there and the memories flooded back of the last time I was here.
Before we went in the building, I described it, and there was a little grate. We pulled the grate off stuff, and they looked under and they're like, "Oh no, there's the hole."
It's abandoned. We go underneath it, and sure enough, there's this chamber dug out under the house.
So, once again, how do the coincidence theorists explain Bonacci simply being able to go to this gate, open the gate, and there's an underground chamber in this random house in Colorado? I mean, this is kind of crazy. It's almost like Bonacci knew exactly where everything was. How is that possible if he's lying about everything? And why was this scrubbed from the internet? And why was this episode never aired again? Do any coincidence theorists have any explanations here? Blake Starry, that's from the reported abductions. There's an additional 500,000 that are apparently reported but not to law enforcement. So are there any coincidence theorists in the chat right now? Because how did they explain Bonacci randomly picking out this house in Colorado knowing exactly where the grate was that reveals this underground chamber. Because it's not like this was a basement with a regular door inside. With all says, the guy looks like he hasn't slept in a good while. That is true. That's definitely true.
With kids' initials carved in the wood.
Here's the hole.
It's abandoned. We go underneath it and chamber dug out under the house with kids' initials carved in the wood.
Okay, so they're just initials, but out of all possible initials, like what are the statistically, what are the chances here that they drive Bonacci randomly on Colorado roads, he randomly picks a house, and then knows exactly where to go to this weird looking, I mean, look at this grate. It's like, I wouldn't guess that there's a huge underground chamber behind that grate there. I mean, let's see what the grate looks like before. So, I mean, it almost looks like a tiny little storage area, right? Like an under porch storage area. It doesn't look like it's going to open to this giant cavern. And there happens to, and look, it's dug out. Like, it's not like a finished basement or anything. It's like, I mean, this looks so weird. I mean, and ominous. And there just so happen to be JG initials in this house that Bonacci randomly picks out. Like, what is the coincidence theorist explanation for this? I mean, I would just like to know. I haven't heard, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say Bonacci's lying. But what are the coincidence theorist explanation on how Bonacci was randomly able to pick out a random house, just so happened to know which grate went to this huge underground chamber that he said was there, and just so happened to have Johnny Gosch's initials carved in the wood? I mean, what possible coincidence theorist cope can explain this? So this is a low-res video, so I can't see the exact carving here, but this America's Most Wanted producer is saying that Johnny Gosch's initials were there. And from what I saw before, I actually went over handwriting from Johnny Gosch in earlier episodes from letters that supposedly he wrote to Noreen. Again, check out the early episodes. This is the most comprehensive Johnny Gosch podcast on the interwebs. Blake Starry says, so the unsolved number is unsolvable, especially when you factor in things like orphans after they turn 18 and unreported cases, if I understand correctly. Yes, again, Blake Starry, watch this from the beginning. I go over a lot. I mean, it's potentially hundreds of thousands. So outside of the 800,000 number, there's an additional 500,000 that are never reported to law enforcement in the first place, but they know about them. So apparently they're either reported to independent organizations or just not to law enforcement. And so then there's an additional number of the ones that nobody knows about because they're never reported to anybody, not law enforcement, not anybody else. So you're looking at potentially hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's a staggering number. But yeah, so there's no coincidence theorist in the chat that has an explanation for this. I mean, I'd like to hear one. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. I want is there any explanation on how Bonacci can know this? Or is he just the luckiest guy in the world that he's able to pick out a house that has this crazy underground chamber that has Johnny Gosch's initials?
This is where they kept some of the kids
hidden away out underneath the here so that if anyone ever tried to come looking for him, they could run him underneath the house here.
And so that there was this sense that we're really close, something is going on here. But every time we found a clue, we ran into a brick wall. The owner of the house, which had been abandoned, was a former prison guard who disappeared. The people who had composite drawings never became real people. We never could go after them as individuals. Couldn't expose them and get them brought in for questioning.
So this was 1992, but since then, all of these names have been made public, and a lot of them do have criminal records. I go over it on previous episodes. I'm not going to go over all of it now. But back in 92, I guess they didn't have the matching names.
There's the things you think are true, there's the things you know are true, and then there are the things you can prove in court. And the only thing that matters is what can you prove in court. And we didn't have anything that we could prove in court. The Johnny Gosch case has haunted me, in a way that nothing else that I encountered on America's Most Wanted has. And we encountered horrific crimes.
Wow. I mean, wow. You have the producer of America's Most Wanted saying the Johnny Gosch case has haunted him like no other case. I mean, this is insane. I mean, I can't imagine being at that house with that basement and in the presence of Bonacci and his energy as all of that's going on. Can you imagine being this producer? Like, let's say, Bonacci, because before Bonacci takes you to the house, I don't know what the opinion is. Maybe they think he's crazy. What are you going to be feeling when you show up at the house? Okay, he doesn't feel good. Maybe he's crazy. Then he points you to the exact entrance to this ominous, I've never seen any basement look dug out like that. On some kind of intentionally dug out basement, and then you see the JG initials on the wood in a post, on a wooden post, just like Bonacci said. Can you imagine how haunting that would be for anybody? Even for a producer of America's Most Wanted, who's covered dozens, if not hundreds, of these cases. Can you imagine how haunting that would have been? Would you doubt anything Bonacci says after that? And look at this guy's face. This guy does not appear to be lying. Like, this is the complete opposite of Leonard Gosch. This guy looks like just an absolute picture of authenticity here. This guy looks like he stared into that abyss you're not supposed to be staring into. This guy looks absolutely haunted by the events of this case. He does not look at the genuine nature written all over his face. Out of all of the dozens or hundreds of cases covered on America's Most Wanted, if not thousands, I don't know how many years it ran, this guy saying the Johnny Gosch case has haunted him unlike any other. Is that because of this trafficking network? Mayor McCheese in the chat says, in my personal opinion, it is so hard to disprove Paul. Everything he's said has been backed up. I believe he led Noreen to so much. Respect to Paul and Noreen, both true advocates for children. Yes, Clark writes in the chat saying, but they threw Paul Bonacci in prison and labeled him a sex offender for life and used that conviction to discredit him. They did, but when you look at the big picture, all of this information, his multiple personalities, the crimes he says he was forced to commit, it actually doesn't it make him more credible? Because if his story is true, that's exactly what would be happening. Dynamo Art says Kirby Summers is right up there with Dave McGowan and Bruce Mindshock. She's studied it all. Epstein, Dutroux, Franklin, etc. It's international and constant. We need a new system. Yes. There's so much evil going on out there. And again, I can't reiterate enough how disgusting coincidence theorists are to deny that all of this evil exists, because they're just allowing it to continue. Clark Rice says, I know of a program where select high-achieving high school kids from across the country were given overnight trips to visit Strategic Air Command. Oh, wow. Clark Rice, now that you brought that up, I have to call up a friend of mine. I vaguely remember an overnight trip. I believe it was elementary school. Like, there was some kind of, in the 90s, they had gifted programs. And I don't know if this, I don't remember if it was it elementary or middle school? I vaguely remember some overnight trip also to some kind of military base. You just reminded me about that. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. I don't know if anybody, I'm trying to remember if anybody actually went. Because I think some of the parents were like, that's kind of weird. But I wonder if anybody actually went. I don't remember that in high school. You're saying high achieving, so would that only be in like specialized high schools or public, random public high schools? Margaret Lee Reed in the chat saying, another problem, fear, is what happens to them when they age out. Ever released, never found alive or remains. If released or escaped, do they never tell because of all those who are involved? Power. Yeah, I mean, who knows? They have different, maybe they have different identities and continue in some kind of adjacent adult industry or something like that. Clark Rice says, to military bases, my brother did. Wait, you're saying your brother went on these overnight trips to military bases? Do we want to be going down this rabbit hole, Clark? Wow, Blake Starry with an interesting point here. When he says haunted, I wonder if this case ever made him question his coworkers or superiors, or if he ever received threats. Look in this man's eyes right here. This is like the complete opposite of Leonard. You see some kind of genuine horrified nature here. That's a good point, because if John Walsh himself was compromised, which some people believe he was, yeah, that's a great question. I wonder what this guy thought of the other producers in America's Most Wanted, or network heads, or whatever. Is that the reason he's saying it haunted him more than any other? Because it opens the door to, you know, Epstein-related upper echelon rings? Wow, Clark saying public high school students in leadership feeder programs. My brother went from Washington to Colorado. Did he ever tell you what happened? I don't really know more than that. The program existed. My brother went. Huh. Mayor McCheese says they allow this level of evil to happen because they are simply so uncomfortable with it that they have to block it out. No, I could understand the people that block it out, like the normies that just refuse to discuss it and don't look at it. I'm talking about the coincidence theorist goofs who are constantly engaging in social media and pretending it's all fake and verbalizing it's all fake and just spending countless hours on all this. It's totally understandable that some of these mentally weak normies, they're not going to want anything to do with it. They just kind of pretend it's fake and they just don't give it any attention. That's understandable to a certain extent. But yeah, no, there's so many goofs all over social media that are actively out there saying, oh, this is all fake. South to West says, goof's gonna goof. That is true. That is true. Fire Pixie says the GATE program for advanced students. Yeah, that's ominous. Wow. Yeah, I think, yeah, there's a couple seconds left in this clip.
If America matters is what can you prove in court. And we didn't have anything that we could prove in court. The Johnny Gosch case has haunted me, you know, in a way that nothing else that I encountered on America's Most Wanted has. And we encountered her, you know, in a way that nothing else that we could prove in court. The Johnny Gosch case has haunted me, you know, in a way that nothing else that I encountered on America's Most Wanted has. And we encountered horrific crimes. If America's Most Wanted, with all of our resources, couldn't solve this case, then chances are no one would. And as I looked around, no one else was trying to solve the case. And as I looked around, no one else was trying to solve the case. I looked around, no one else was trying to solve the case.
Yeah, I don't think this guy's compromised here. If he were compromised, would he be saying nobody's even trying to solve the case? Like the FBI, none of these law enforcement agencies are trying to solve it. Why are they not trying to solve it? Does he know why? Or does he suspect why? And that's why this case has haunted him more than any other case. And that tells you all you need to know about the West Des Moines police. Yeah, they never even interviewed Bonacci. That's a good point. They just assumed he wasn't credible without even interviewing him. Without even wanting to find out if anything he said could be corroborated. I mean, maybe everything he's saying is fake, but they never even interviewed him to find that out. I wonder why. I wonder why. Mayor McChee says, is there anywhere or any way we can see this clip and or source? I've never seen it in full or been able to find it. I will clip it from this. I'll make it full screen and clip it from here. And I'll upload it as a clip. This is all I can find. I don't know if anybody has made the full episode public. Noreen Gosch personally requested, so Noreen told me. She emailed me and she told, because I asked her about this episode. She said that she personally has been requesting this full episode from America's Most Wanted, and America's Most Wanted has refused to give her the full episode. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just insanity. For years, for decades now, they refuse to give her the full episode. I wonder what else is in the episode, but I believe this was the most damning clip. I think this clip right here is why they don't want it out. Oh, okay. Clark is bringing up... Are you bringing up... Yeah, I talk about this in the earlier episodes. Everything that... Yeah, let me bring up what you're talking about. Are you talking about Curadori? All the evidence that he had? Are you talking about Gary Caradori or a different investigator? Yeah, apparently he had a lot of damning information on many different cases connected to the Franklin scandal and DC and all of this stuff. Is that who you're talking about? Or are you talking about a different investigator who was killed? But here's some more receipts from letters from just correspondence. I mean, some of this stuff is really hard to read. So, yeah, there were supposedly some of these individuals were all in contact with each other. And DeCamp documented all this. They used code words, code names, and also referenced, here we go, Mike Emilio died of AIDS. The Colonel is coming to Mexico. I mean, just a lot of weird stuff in these correspondences. Supposedly Johnny Gosch had face surgery or something. And just a lot of code words here. Used for snuff. Some are not killed, just faked. Yeah, I mean, this is crazy stuff, but the receipts are all there. The receipts are all there. All part of the Franklin investigation. DeCamp exposed a lot of this. Aquino just implicated in so many of these different cases, but all very, very tragic. Duck and Felony says, OMG, look at the writing, the spelling, still a child. Yeah, really sad. Really sad. Obviously, their mental maturation would be stunted as well. Yeah, the Lawrence King. Yeah, we go over that in the previous episodes, Fire Pixie. I go over all of that. I just never found these clips from America's Most Wanted before, and everybody was asking about them. So I found them. I played what I found here, just from what was licensed on the Holloway documentary, and then also directly from the 92 episode. So yeah, I mean, I've never seen a coincidence theorist adequately explain away this part of the episode with Bonacci just somehow knowing a house with this underground chamber that somehow has Johnny Gosch's initials. That's wild. Like, how did the... Yeah, Clark says Corridori was following the Bonacci info. Yeah. I mean, this is crazy stuff. I mean, this is just absolutely mind-shocking. I've never seen coincidence theorists able to explain any of this. They just keep calling the so-called conspiracy theorists, the corruption-aware, crazy. That's their only cope. Appeal to incredulity fallacies and ad hominem logical fallacies. Clark says, it's not one op, it's several interrelated, very much the way the intelligence community operates, or at least similar methods, interconnected, compromised people. Appears to be so. I mean, pre-Epstein, I mean, not really, but I guess you could maybe say some coincidence theorists were just naive and not just, you know, absolutely obtuse and borderline mentally disabled. But post-Epstein, I mean, it's kind of crazy. The deniers post-Epstein don't really make a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, if there's no other questions here, I'll round this episode out here. I mean, there's actually plenty more in this case and a lot of other cases. But, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of specific trafficking and snuff rings in the Des Moines area as well. I went over all of them in the previous episodes as well. Yeah, Clark? Wow, Clark, you've done a lot of research here. Yeah, Gacy, Norman. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Clark has done a lot of, Clark knows a lot of stuff here. So your brother never gave you any information on what happened on that overnight trip to the base? Yeah, Fire Pixie, North Fox Island, and the Rolodex. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, the fact that a lot of these cases, even the JonBenet Ramsey case, they are all connected. In a way, so, okay. Maybe I'm the only one that's going to point this out. In a way, that gives me more hope for mankind, right? Because people aren't inherently evil. If all of these cases are interconnected by the few evil people, so there really aren't that many random crimes going on. Because if these corrupt scum at the top in these government positions, they're doing all of these infamous cases, that means there's really not a lot of common people actually doing this evil stuff. So that's actually, I mean, at least there's that kind of positive, right? That's a positive takeaway. Not too many but here, but so maybe you don't necessarily need to suspect your neighbor all the time, but you still got to be vigilant because, I mean, a lot of scum out there. So yeah, we'll wrap this one up. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. The next true crime, I'll probably try to... I have another episode coming up in the Panama Hikers case, which is another one where coincidence theorists are just... Oh, man. I mean, just logic has gone out the window in the true crime community in so many of these cases. If you want to help support the Mindshock podcast, help keep up awareness in a lot of these unsolved cases, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.